so the proposal that you're being asked to approve reflects change, a number of changes that Stephanie Ellis, I'm sorry, Ms. Ellis recommended, and that I didn't believe changed. I thought, of course, if I put it in there, I thought they were reasonable recommendations to put into the proposal, and I thought it didn't change the tenor or the intent of the committee, and it maintained its advisory nature, which is what it is. It's a committee that can't take any official action on its own, but can serve to advise the administration and the school board.
She already talked that.
I don't even know. All right, so, sorry, I'll just go through it. So the one thing that I was concerned about, I'm gonna just not go in order here because I don't have the memory. I know we had discussed, the one thing, the number of folks that are gonna be on there. I think I counted there's gonna be 10 to 33
Yep.
committee members. I definitely want everybody's opinion, but I don't know if there's another way to have, not to have committees and subcommittees, but to find a way that we can have everybody represented appropriately, but not have 50 people. So it's a concern, since, I mean, I want everybody to be able to have their say in it, to have a piece of part of it, but I also, sometimes when you get a large group,
It's a lot.
it can get very contentious, a lot of different personalities, a lot of different opinions, and, but with that, how is the process gonna happen? Like, what's the process to get somebody on the committee? What do they have to do? What's the approval process? I just wanna vet it out, just to make sure, especially this personally for someone who's potentially sitting on this, I wanna make sure I'm approving it, I'm on board with everything, and I'm in the know with it all. That's just who I am.
Yeah, on page 2 or 3, Ms. Ellis is referring to the bottom part of the committee membership. There was a large number there that was informed from another group in another district. I didn't object to your suggestion. I recognize the size of the group could be a little unwieldy, so it is a more manageable number now. We had initially talked about, if you look down the bottom on the calendar, September 1st to 3rd being to promote committee openings by multiple mediums. And it's always the beginning of the committee that gets a little choppy, right? Because once it's up and running, it'll be able to manage itself. What I would likely have to do is, after tonight, go back and recommend some changed dates here, because we tabled this, so we pushed everything back just a little bit. I think it would be only appropriate, to kind of advertise the opportunities to be a part of this committee, and then have that application period announcement and all those things to get that moving. What we imagined was that the initial committee members, anyone who was interested, would be able to indicate their intent and their interest to be on the committee. The assistant superintendent and superintendent would select initially people to be on the committee, recognizing that there's a limited amount of time that you can be on this committee. After that, the opportunity of selecting people on the committee would be up to the CARES committee itself. That's whoever is selected to lead the CARES committee in the future would be the ones that would oversee, again, the new members coming on. Really, in terms of how do you initially get it started, typically what has happened, there is either a board rep or administrator will essentially have to find people who will be a diverse enough group to come on and to represent a variety of interests, so that it doesn't become a political group, that it's really a group that meets the intentions of that's in here. And sometimes that amount of people, that initial leadership group, can be smaller than the full committee. It's very possible that you might not get enough volunteers right out of the gate. Typically what we've understood is you don't get enough people to meet the number of folks that are going to be on the committee. Everyone says we'd like to have it. You don't get as many people raising their hands saying, but I want to be the one on that committee. And that may very well be the case.
Are we gonna have anybody who's interested, submit an application or a letter of interest,
some parents from Parkside, we have some from Aston, we have some from Brookhaven. Ideally, parent of SPN in high school, ideally, some parents of minority groups, if they're interested in participating, right? So clearly, having that perspective is critical to have.
Absolutely. Can I make a request to, have at least one, if not two board members to kind of sit with you and Dr. Finnegan to go through that list, just so that it's, kind of well-rounded. And we all have an invested piece in this at some point, so.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Dr. Stenoff, have we had any interest, and my concern, but hope, is that the student representation. Adults mess stuff up, especially when it comes to this stuff, and this is about students, so we need to hear them. They are the voice we need to hear. Have we already gotten, we're doing 2 per school, so I would imagine the elementary type school, that might be a little more.
Yeah, the topic would be beyond elementary. So we already have, last year there were 3 students at Sun Valley that were part of this Delco Student Forum. So that Colleen probably has heard about this at the DCIU. So the DCIU hosted some student forums where he brought students together from every high school in the county to talk about issues of equity, right? To talk about issues involving race, and to have these kind of candid conversations. And every school sent 3 members. And none of the superintendents participated or led it because, again, he wanted it to be organic. Right? He wanted it to be conversations from kids around the county. Joe Palekis, we have to give it as a point of contact. The administration, he's a point of contact if the DCIU reaches out about this. So the Delco Student Forum, they hope to have that again this year. They were doing the meetings during Zoom. Kids would Zoom together and talk and provide feedback to the leadership at the DCIU. We were happy to, do what all the schools have done and provide a couple of kids who are motivated to be in that. I would think those same students might be motivated to be a part of it. But I also think it's important that you don't necessarily hear from people who want to just strictly be involved in a DAEI committee, but you're actually hearing from student leaders who are representative of the whole group. So a student council president, right? Team captains, right? People who are in cheerleading, people who are in academic clubs, hearing their thoughts about what they experience in school in a way that is more neutral than you might get from students who are truly motivated to be a part of this group would be of value.
Yeah, I hate to limit the number, especially high school students, a lot of talented high school students that can really give a lot of feedback on this, and I'd like to cut the number of adults down.
Yeah.
And have these students, as many students as we can get.
Kids, we need adults and parents to be monitors of it, but I think sometimes the adults and parents make more issues than the kids even or need or acknowledge. So if the kids are the committee, and we're just, the parents are the monitors of it, or the board members or community members, I think that's the direction.
They're the ones on the ground that see the issues and feel the issues perhaps, so.
So, and kind of to piggyback off of that, the one other thing that, I wanted to consider is, not to not be transparent, but there's gonna be a lot of very sensitive things are gonna be brought up, especially if we have the students come in, they may have a particular experience that they wanna bring up. It makes me nervous to have it public or video recorded, because then we may not get a student that's gonna be able to come out and say, hey, this is what happened, this is my experience, this is what what happened to me. I think it's very sensitive. This whole entire topic is so sensitive, to be honest. But in order for us to really identify any potential issues that we do have in the district that's going on, I think it's a great idea, Bernie, that we bring the students, because they're the ones who come to tell us what's going on. I want to protect them, and I want them to be able to be in a safe, place to where that they can, I'm trying to say my words right. I want them to be able to tell us and know that they can be honest with us, because if we don't know, we can't fix any of these issues.
Well, I think a way around that is to have the student share with one of the adults in the room, and the adult can share the experience, knowing that it's valid, but, but not naming the person that it came from. Because sometimes you get those comments from people and you're thinking, did this kid really write this, or did this kid really say this? So I think them sharing with a person that would keep that anonymous, and then that adult
That's
would
what I'm saying,
share
like
it.
with the committee, and then, you know, if we have to use, you know, we can say, we put this policy in place, or we put this change in place because of this particular, you know, we've noticed this was a pattern, you know, this will happen. You know what I mean? Like, so there's gotta be some level of confidentiality, in my mind, especially, you know, what if they come and they wanna talk about a teacher, and that teacher made them uncomfortable, or another student, and we don't want that student's name, or that teacher's name, or it could be an administrator, it could be, you know, so anybody, you know, but I just think that there's a level that we have to, and I don't know how we do that. It was just a concern as I was sitting here going through it and just trying to put myself in, whether it's an administrator or a student or a teacher, them coming, and even if it is, maybe it's a teacher that comes in and says, hey, this is what I've experienced. I want them to feel comfortable, because if we do have issues, we wanna be able to address them, and I want them to be genuine, you know what I mean?
And I think that,
Exactly.
that would be established in the ground rules. But I don't wanna lose track though of the point about student participation, so it currently calls for up to 2 students. I'm hearing the board indicate that more voices will be valid. Do you want that 4?
Yeah, I hate to limit it, especially for high school level. You're gonna have folks that are, you know, you're gonna, I think, have a higher level of participation than say, you know, an elementary school, so.
Would 4 per grade level be like?
What?
No,
Oh,
or 2,
Yeah,
2 per
it's-
grade level, so you have a total of 6.
Like,
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah, and then
8,
you
I'm
you
sorry.
evaluate, you see what participation, you know, this is a volunteer group, you can turn down volunteers, especially when students that can really, you know, really provide a lot of feedback and that's group, so.
We can move that up to 8 students, and let the committee determine if that's the right number.
and then will we have them do the same type thing with a letter of interest, a letter of intent, or whatever, just, you know, or do we just take?
Or are we gonna do a survey,
We might have
like, and
0,
ask
so
them
we don't-
questions, because I guess having them, I'm not sure if they'll even know what we're looking for if we have them write what they write. So would it be like a survey, or a question and answer kind of thing, give us your thoughts on this, give us your thoughts on that? Like, I'm just saying.
Yeah, I think these topics are probably still a bit above a lot of high school kids, particularly when you're talking about, you know, we're trying to evaluate what professional development workshop might be helpful for teachers, but I think there would be times where you're gonna say, you know what, let's stop talking about this, let's ask the kids. You know, and so there's time, you know, like, you know, our own board reps, there's times you can say, hey, tell us about what's happening in your school, where they might have no comment whatsoever to say on the budget.
Right.
And that's where I would imagine the student voice would be powerful. I don't wanna like get ahead of it, like the committee has to decide what it is that they want to do. But one of the places would be to have an equity audit conducted, which is just a lay of the land, like, which, you know, do we really have an issue here or not? We might not, you know, let's make sure we're addressing the real issues. The real issues might be related around poverty, they might be
So-
related around disability, they
Right.
might not be related around race.
That's the
We
first
don't
time
know
I've
yet.
heard of that as an option, and I could have missed it, there's been a lot that's going on. What is that, what does that entail, and who does that?
The districts, I have to get more information because I haven't spent much time evaluating the value and the process of an equity audit. I've only heard of districts that have said, we need to hear from a third party what the issues are. Because people are afraid to put their names to certain facts and figures, and experiences. Some people will not believe the information unless it comes from an objective source. So that's usually been the motivation of districts that say, let's do an audit to get a sense of what issues we need to improve. And that audit might come back and say, looking at the data, your special needs students are out 2 times as much as your regular students. That's a problem. Looking at the data, your poor students don't participate in extracurricular activities. That's a problem. So those are the kind of things that the audit would create, but I can't really speak beyond that because I haven't put much time into investigating it yet, because it's an option that's down the line. But I also think it's something that the committee would have to decide. They might say that we're not ready for that, we don't need that. I think I have to rely on the committee to give us advice on whether or not there's value in doing it.
Has there ever been a survey done or surveys that would give us some perspective as to, from the students, for the
Yeah.
students, that would give us an idea of, I mean, I know we do surveys from time to time. So for the board, I think it would be helpful to see the results of surveys. Do you
We-
want that?
Yeah, we pretty much tamped down surveys. We had, a couple of years back, you remember, a survey that was asking middle school kids about their sexual orientation. We weren't aware that was in the survey, so, you know, we have been more careful
Okay.
about surveys. And we heard the board saying, that, you know, you would like to see these surveys before they're approved, so we know that. Those surveys do exist though, Lisa, you know, and, they're out there, right? And they're usually come under the umbrella of school climate. And they have increasingly got into the issues of equity or bullying around your disability or potential bullying around your race or religion. So they have expanded the role. We would just have to be careful that the questions don't become something the parents really didn't want their kids to participate in.
I think the parents should agree, like, sign something to
Yeah.
say, you know, we approve them taking the survey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found my document. A list. Sorry. So, just gonna pull out some of these other ones, like, so some of the, just to be transparent, some of the things that, you know, I had asked to relook at is, you know, in some areas, you know, where we were I feel, my personal opinion, is that we kind of target, not, I hate to use that word, we, emphasize certain groups in here, and my idea of a committee like this would be to make sure and ensure that any and all kids are inclusive. So my recommendation to Dr. Steinhoff was to kind of take out where you're calling out a certain group of person, and just make it all inclusive so that everybody feel, you know, everybody's part of this, and it's not just, you know, pulling out one particular group. So, I'm guessing you kind of agreed. I don't know whatever anybody else.
I actually wanted to piggyback off that, because I know it was taken out, but it was never answered. And I know, Dr. Steinhoff, you put most of this together, so my question is, were you referring to when you said the historically underrepresented?
Yeah.
Like, in your mind, who was that?
Oh, yeah, well, typically in our field, historically underrepresented groups tends to be racial minorities. Tend to be. And they have typically not been represented in faculty. They've typically not been represented in parent leaders and parent PTLs. And they typically are underrepresented in student leadership positions. Now, fortunately, I will not say that's the case in Sun Valley, but one of the things that I've been pleased to see in Sun Valley is that we have had some of our top academic students be students of color, persons of color, and even on sports and on academic clubs. So I've been happy about that. But that's what we generally refer to. But I didn't have an issue removing that reference if we thought that it was going to be potentially divisive.
So, it's more, for like the middle school or the elementary school, you think there might be more of an issue?
Well, what they meant was trying to advocate for groups that historically have not been able to advocate for themselves, right? So historically, you will get more advocacy and more involvement from parents that are in the majority than you do from parents who are in the minority.
Or that are financially not as secure?
That's right.
So, did we ever think about talking to the parents of these children to kind of give some kind of support to them to help their students? Because I think that's where it all starts. It starts at home, you know? Because we do our best in school trying to teach every kid, right? So, like you were saying about, or someone was saying about, you know, having, I'm losing my train of thought, but I'm just thinking that, like, why don't some of these parents get involved in PTL? Or why don't they are active in the school? Maybe we need to reach out to them from home. That's what I think. I mean.
Yeah, I can tell you from my personal experience, having been a principal in another state, that taught in a much more impoverished background, what we found was that school was at times a place where parents didn't feel welcome.
Okay.
They didn't succeed in school themselves, and they felt intimidated when they went to faculty meetings or PTL meetings. It just didn't feel like they belonged.
And I think that the people in this room, no matter what they're thinking right now, when they come here, sometimes they feel intimidated, but once you get there, you feel better and you feel like you're a part of something. So can we welcome them into the school and say, hey, come on over, we need a mom to do this,
Yeah.
or,
Yeah, I mean, that comes down to, and we tried that, parent outreach. And sometimes what you have, regardless of race, sometimes with parents who might not be of the same financial means as others, they can't attend evening events because they might have a second job, or they can't attend because they might have, they might be the only person who's raising their kids. So those are the experiences that I had in a different district.
right,
Which told me something. It really taught me that sometimes the lack of participation is not because of disinterest, it's because of other structural
or
challenges.
not invitation.
Yeah, and not an indication.
Invitation,
Oh, right.
invitation,
Yeah.
yeah.
And districts, I think, do try to do that kind of parent outreach and, come out and participate. And, but we're finding that, sometimes when parents are satisfied with what's happening in their schools, they're like, okay, that's the role of the teacher. I'll do my job. I'm gonna stay home and I'm gonna make sure my kid does her homework. I don't have to go in and volunteer in the classroom just to show that I care about my kid. Those type of experiences. That was the motivation behind that term historically in the river.
Yeah, you got a lot.
No. So when we talk about promoting recruitment, support, retention of teachers and staff of diverse, how do we achieve that? Like, is that something the committee's gonna work on? Is that something we work with Nina on? Sorry, I have a lot of questions, but I just wanna make sure that I understand each and every one.
Well, this is what I was talking about. I appreciate your interest. So, no, that would be something that would run parallel certainly with Nina's office. And, so Nina might be able to share, look, these are our efforts to attract a diverse applicant pool. And she has pointed out to me that there's differences when employers say, we want diverse hiring versus diverse applicant pool. We want a diverse applicant pool so that you can still select the most qualified person for the position, right? But you want people to say, you know what, that's a place I'd like to work. I want to apply for that. And it could provide feedback, to our HR office in terms of what programs will we participate in, what job recruitment fair should we go to? Are we seeing value in it? Possibly hearing from persons of color who work for our district and saying, what is the challenge? Why do we only have one African-American teacher on our entire faculty? Why do we only have one Hispanic teacher on our entire faculty? So having that kind of feedback. Our faculty would benefit from being, I believe, a little more diverse even with different religions. So just to have a more diverse faculty that is a little bit more reflective of our community. But I will tell you that right now it is an enormous challenge to attract any candidates into the field of education. So we will tell you, we have positions where we get maybe 1, 2, or 3 applicants. And that's a far cry from when we used to have over 100 applicants for a teaching position. There were times we have 600 applicants.
I wonder, has anybody, this is just now my brain going, so does it, I'm a stats person, do we know, has education from going into that as a profession, going to school, has that number dropped? Are
Oh,
we losing?
considerable.
Really?
As has the number of people who not only go into education in college, they go through the process of actually being certified by the state of Pennsylvania, which is what we need to get certified qualified
So
teachers.
there's not
So
even,
the number of
there's,
certifications has decreased, and so for an elementary position, we still have a really strong applicant pool, but for certain secondary positions especially, that's, a decreased applicant pool, but if you look at the number of people who have been certified in secondary math or have secondary math and secondary special education, the number of people actually certified to do those jobs is lower than it has been.
how, I just don't know, I'm just thinking of okay, so how do we attack this, how do we address it, are we kind of grasping at straws, we're kind of looking at a shortage in teachers, it's not a growing profession, it's a decreasing profession, so
Homegrown, we've begun to talk about that, where you begin actually working with students in high school and at Sun Valley and talking about education as a career and assisting with them as they go through and get their bachelor's degree or start with their associates in
Making that
teaching.
connection to kind of bring them back.
And coming back and doing student teaching in the high school that you went to, in the elementary school, and then applying for our substitute and our LTS positions. So you have this pipeline of people that we know intimately and can say, not only was this a great student in our school, or not only was it an interested candidate, that we've worked with them, we've trained them to be ready to teach in our classrooms. And we're actually at that point with administrators.
And they understand our district.
Yeah, and they know our district, right?
Our kids.
And that's the way we are with administrators. We're gonna have to get back to having a bench of aspiring leaders amidst our teacher ranks. Because the days of just kind of doing a posting and expecting 40 or 50 really qualified candidates, they're gone.
So with respect to the committee, so what is the committee members' involvement in that piece? Like, is it just, you giving a report, and like, so how is that going to look?
I think
In your mind.
we are presuming that, you know, we're going to get feedback from parents who are on the committee. And they may say, we never even see the advertisements, so if we don't see these advertisements for the positions, how would people who might be minority applicants, how would they know that? Or they might provide some connections for us, like you have with Newman. They could provide some connections for us and say, hey, I work at this place, we heard about this program. And then you just have some more thought partners at the table, providing some advice and some guidance to Nina. And it's not just for teaching positions, right?
Right.
Paraprofessionals, playground aides, secretarial positions, all those things. So it's give it advice and suggestions, but I can see that being one of these areas, it's really, they're gonna really rely on HR's expertise.
So like, Nina would be a part of the committee?
She is listed as one,
So,
yeah, critical one, yeah. Particularly helpful because, you know, she is privy to some conversations that employees will have with her in her HR role. She'll have a better understanding of what their overall morale and experience on the workforce is like.
so Nina could really be a pretty big, like, I don't wanna say a full representation, but she would be able to be a good also representative for the teachers because of her position.
So Dr. Steinhoff, you said something about their religion, but how does that pertain to what the public school's teaching? I don't understand, like, I understand if you're Jewish by birth is one thing.
Yeah.
But what does religion have to do with it?
I don't think it's related to our curriculum. It's concerned to ensure that people are not discriminated against on the basis of religion is certainly an issue that comes along with the rights and there are certain legal protections. But I'll give you an example. We have, in the past, we had heard from some employees who are of Jewish faith, who had indicated that our school calendar didn't adequately take into consideration their high holy days. And they were correct. So that's the kind of feedback that I would like to think, you know, that this committee would look at and would say, do we have a balanced calendar that is considerate of all the religious faith days? Or is it a calendar that's really based on a Judeo-Christian calendar? So that's an example of how like a perspective could be helpful for
There's other religions too that would.
Correct.
Like, it could really get crazy, right?
Absolutely.
That's why we call winter
Yeah.
and spring break. We call them differently.
Yeah.
I don't know when this holiday is.
Well, this was several years ago, and I don't mind messing what happened. There was a back-to-school night that was scheduled on one of the high holidays. And it was very apparent to me, it was a former HR director. And we talked about it, and all I could do at the time was apologize. I said, that got past us, that was an oversight, that should not have happened. I think that's an example when we talk about the feedback about religion. It's not so much curriculum. We don't teach curriculum in our curriculum. We don't teach religion in our curriculum or public school. It's in terms of feedback about how your religion might influence your work experience.
I don't have your answer, Dr. Steinhoff, so I apologize, but for like the first one where you're saying create clarity, raise awareness around diversity, like what does that look like for the committee? Like how do we, I know you provided a lot of the toolkits, but you know, to go, some of them I put little bit alarming, but I know that just because we're using it doesn't mean that we're using that piece of it. So like, I just kind of want to know like what you're, I know you explained it to me, but just to give it out to everybody.
No, I think it's for the committee to determine, but for instance, we have awareness events like Rock Your Socks that goes on in the spring for a group of disabled students. This committee might say, you know what, there are some other awareness events out there, that maybe we want to be a part of. I think, when I think of that, I also think of bringing to our attention, like awareness of data that maybe we're not aware of. So when we talk about is this committee even necessary? The committee should be able to say, yes, it is because, in other words, like the survey shows us that students in this demographic group don't feel welcome at the high school, or don't feel welcome at elementary school, or students in this demographic group, maybe parents of EL students, don't feel welcome at back-to-school nights. So that would be raising our awareness of issues that maybe we don't see because our minds are occupied with, things that are urgent right before us.
You have more?
We've answered a lot of them, I'm just going. So number 9, where it talked about the curriculum. I know you did make an amendment to that one, because where it had talked about, it had the word curriculum. And we've gone back and forth with this and the level of involvement of this committee, and even to the board to an extent. We don't, we allow the teachers and administration to kind of do their thing, right? We don't generally get involved. So I know you took it out, but can you explain, how you explained it to me? I know you took it out, but the reason why was it in there? I personally would like to, if we have this committee and, we're here for the school students and stuff, like, why was it in there in the first place? Like, should we be looking at it? I mean, I know that they're,
Yeah, the reference to feedback on curriculum, most of these I drew from, probably looking at about 20 to 25 other sample charters for districts that have been up and running. And that reference, as I perceived it, would be a scenario where, let's say the school board wants to adopt a textbook, and you would be interested in the view, is this textbook truly emblematic of the diverse population of students that we have? Or is it a textbook that has pictures of primarily just white students and nobody else? No Asian Americans, no Hispanic, no disabled students. So I could see how if the board wanted feedback, they could say, look, before we adopt the social studies piece, we have a recommendation from the administration, but we maybe would like to hear the perspective of, is this appropriate? Do students think that this is a curriculum that's valuable to them? Do students think that this is a diverse enough textbook series that the topics that are covered aren't of just one culture, but are of several? So I can see how it could potentially provide that advisory kind of deal.
right, because I didn't necessarily want it take it out personally, I thought it was a good thing, but I know in previous conversations, it wasn't something that the committee was doing, so that's why I had questioned it. Then I personally, like, if that's an issue in the school and if it has part of this DEI committee, I don't know how anybody else feels like, maybe we do look, not go deep dive into it, but maybe we do have like an overview of, especially maybe new things, when you're not going back and, digging in the pile that we have now, but I don't know anybody else's.
I had geography in school, and we learned about the Aztecs, we learned about Germans, and we learned about this and that and stuff. And I'm not sure what's different now. That, like, a picture of somebody, and they had people, they were talking about the Africa and, the continent. They had black black people there. So I'm not really sure what, I'm a little confused on that. Is this committee gonna be reviewing the books? Are they gonna be reviewing the curriculum?
I don't have that down as a charge of this committee.
Yeah, but
Right,
that's.
but that's what I'm saying, in the beginning it said curriculum, that's why I had questioned it, I just wanted to get more clarification of
Yeah.
what number 9 meant, just because, curriculum was in there, like, that's all, I just wanted to get clarification of, and I didn't want you to just
Well, that might be a fair point. It could be that people, parents or students are objecting to existing programs that we have. And it would be interesting to hear the perspective of students. Like, do you find this objectionable? Or, like,
That's what
that-
matters, it's not, it doesn't matter what I think,
Yeah.
that's what,
I think
what's
having
happening in
alumni
students'
on
lives.
it too. Some recent, like not 10 years ago, but maybe a few that have a perspective looking back in to their experience. I think that would be helpful also.
Okay.
That's actually not a bad idea, because they'd be less candid.
Yeah, and they're not in there right now, so I think, and they're a little more mature.
Yeah.
So they see things differently once they get out in the world.
Yeah, exactly, whether they're going to college or, it's a whole new world once you get out of high school. You definitely experience a lot of different things, and sometimes you do that self-reflection, you're looking back and being like, oh, either it wasn't that bad, or hey, different things, so it's a good idea to have a little time. That's all, I just wanted to get the clarification of that, because now you did take that piece out of it.
Are you done?
Sorry, I
No,
spent a
you're
lot
good,
of time
you're
on
good.
this, and
That's what Scotty
that's
said.
why I
You're
asked
right,
for it
Scotty.
to be delayed, because I had a lot of questions.
You're
and
very thorough.
needed a lot of, especially again, someone who's potentially sitting on this, so I'm sorry, I'm taking up a ton of time, it's getting late. But, and then just like the toolkits and stuff, again, like I was able to look through some of it, thank you for sending me different information. I just wanna, glad for that, but there are some things that obviously some of them are putting out as part of the training. So, when you talk about training for teachers and administration and stuff, just making sure that, we're all on the same page with what's coming. I know typically the board doesn't approve the trainings, that, everybody just does it. So, I don't know what level that we're gonna have on the committees. I won't take it.
I'm fine, I just wanted to make
I'm
sure.
tired,
you got it.
I'm rambling now.
So, a couple of things that I have an issue with is who's picking the committee. And I think it should be more in the hands of the board, just my opinion. Another thing is our resources, and I understand that we might pick and choose part of those resources, but if you look at the whole agenda of the organizations here, and I reviewed them, and I reviewed their training, now we might not use their training, but the fact that it's in there would be no different than another group that might have some great stuff, but also have a lot of very scary stuff in there. There's, they wanted, one guy wants to talk about surveys, and he wanted to, I don't know, I think everybody needs to review the information in these organizations, because I think we do better on our own than we would with these organizations, I think, and I'm gonna say, they're dangerous.
At least I don't think that needs to be a part of this charter. I
What's
really
that,
put
the
it- I
resources
really-
you mean?
Yeah, I really put it in more as for something for members of the board who might want to learn more, like what is this equity
Mhm.
topic about? How are people addressing it? I don't believe it has to guide the work of the committee.
This is the thing, when I was reading what was put out there, like the general stuff, like Seth was saying, it was very generic. Like you could feed anything into, it really didn't tell me anything. And the only thing that told me is when I started looking at the training videos and seminars and things like that. And let me tell you, white supremacy and racism was brought up all the way through it. And I don't think that's where we as a district want to go. I just think there's so many academic issues that we have right now that I don't want to take our focus off of an issue and make it bigger than it is. And I'd rather just focus on the academics. And, this committee might, I think it's too many people. I think it's going to be a problem. And I think it's going to take the board's energy away from trying to deal with it and put it into something that really isn't a big problem in our district. It's a national problem, issues, but not here. I don't think it is. Maybe I'm naive. Maybe I just don't know.
Well, Lisa, the way I look at it, and I agree with a lot of what you say, is that if one student thinks, if one student feels that they're not included for one day, then that's enough to have, in my mind. I come from a company that has 11 employee networks, and I'm on the leadership for women, the Asian leadership, the Black professional group, the military assistance group, the Native American group. These are all voluntary committees. They're committees or employee networks that I'm on. And you know what? I learn a little something. I can participate if I want. People in this committee, I can't imagine all 33 people showing up every single month and giving feedback. But you know, I just think, you know, if one kid gets something out of it, then it's worth doing.
So when you're on these like when you're involved in them,
Sure.
give me an example, something that impacted you.
Well, and it's not, yeah, so from a work perspective, for leadership for women, and men can join, and it was a professional development forum, so we got together, and 5 of us, we presented on a topic, and it polished our presentation skills, and we learned a little, we got to work collaboratively, and that's what it was all about. So it was, these networks don't try to change the company, they provide a resource for employees to learn a little bit from each other and, you know, network and things like that. So I think that's what you're gonna have, you know, that's what hopefully I see this kind of parallel to that, is that some students that maybe they have an outlet to go and talk and bounce ideas off each other, and, you know, just having it will make them feel better. And that's what I'm concerned about. I'm not really concerned about appeasing, you know, necessarily parents or you know, it's, you know, we're a school district, it's about the kids, so.
And I think one of the things that would be helpful, and this is just a general statement, is that when teachers are teaching in the classroom, that they stick to the topic and don't try to overanalyze what kids are thinking or what they should think.
Yeah, and that's something separate.
And I think that's a huge issue when it comes to how a child feels comfortable. So I think that's one of the focuses, maybe for the board, not so much for this committee, because we're responsible. And I think we need to start looking at that, because I think every child deserves not to feel uncomfortable with something they write on a paper that they're going to be graded on. And they have to feel comfortable in that class, and
Yeah.
so you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
And that's the biggest problem.
I don't foresee this committee, no, I'm not speaking, I don't foresee that committee tackling something like that. I could be wrong.
I think that's something the board should be more focused on, because we're responsible to make these kids feel comfortable, and we need to set the guidelines that allow them to do that as they sit down in a classroom, and they want to voice their opinion, or they're taking a test, and they've just been given some information, and it's more the opinion of the teacher, that they feel like, I can't write this down because I'm gonna get a bad grade or whatever, and makes kids feel the most uncomfortable. And I see a huge problem with that, more than one kid that feels uncomfortable.
Right. Well, I mean, that's for another day, I think.
It is for a
Yes.
big discussion
Yeah,
with the
it's
board, I
not- it's
think.
not part of
I
it.
mean, I
Yeah.
think maybe the committee, like, if we have the students, they bring it up, and then that's where the
Yeah.
board members bring it to, you know, maybe executive session.
Sure, it's
you know,
an open
maybe-
forum.
I just think the board should be more involved in who chooses the committee, what our resources are, and what decisions are made. I just think the board is responsible, we're elected. And we're giving it, and then we're gonna have committee people picking committee people. And I don't understand how that works, when we're the ones responsible. So we should really have more input in this. That's my opinion. Now I'm sticking to it.
All right, thanks for the feedback.
Thank you.
4.08 is student handbook. They were all attached to the